Nobody has pulled the curtain back on the political class more in the last decade than Peter Schweizer. You know him from books like Clinton Cash, Secret Empires, Red Handed. Well, he's got a new one. It's called Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Pretty damning accusation. Peter Schweizer is the president of the Government Accountability Institute and, again, the best-selling author of the book Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans, which is available now in all the usual spots. Peter Schweizer, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So I've only had a chance to read some of the excerpts that have been made available to this point, but I'm looking forward to the full read. But from some of what I've read, it's pretty interesting. The connections you make, the historical connections, including with respect to fentanyl, China ostensibly doing to us what the British did to them during the Opium Wars.
Yeah, it's revenge for the Opium Wars. And I think the biggest misnomer that people have about the fentanyl crisis are twofold. Number one is just another drug addiction problem. It's not. Most of the people that die of fentanyl poisoning don't even know they're taking fentanyl. They think they're taking an Adderall or a Vicodin. You know, some kids trying to study late night for a test. But the second one is that this is a problem caused by the Mexican drug cartels. The drug cartels are the junior partners. China runs this operation. They provide the precursors that come from Mexico. 90% of those precursors come into a port in Mexico in Manzanillo. That international terminal is run by a Chinese company. That's why people cannot seem to stop this flow. Those chemicals are sent to a town in northern Mexico where 2,000 Chinese nationals, according to Department of Homeland Security documents I obtained, 2,000 Chinese nationals create the fentanyl for the cartels. The cartels use Chinese pill presses to turn the fentanyl into the pills that they sell on the streets. When the drug cartels were operating in the United States, they used Chinese communication devices because they know the Chinese will not share those communications with U.S. law enforcement. And finally, the laundering of the money. The Mexican drug cartels used to launder their money in Latin American banks. They launder them in Chinese state-owned banks now with the help oftentimes of Chinese students here on education visas. So this is a Chinese operation designed to kill as many Americans as possible, and fentanyl poisoning is now the leading cause of death among Americans under the age of 45.
And so when we see, before we get to the government's role in all this, and the Biden family in particular, but so when we see, as everybody has seen over the last several weeks, thousands of military-age Chinese individuals coming through, for example, a hole in the fence in the San Diego sector, what are we to make of that?
Well, you're to make of that some of them may be here just trying to seek a better life, but there is plenty of precedent for Chinese illegals engaging in criminal activity in the United States. One of the biggest problems we have in the country, I talk about in the book, is a massive increase in illegal marijuana growth operations. This is not the marijuana that's legalized. This is far more potent. And these are run by Chinese illegals that are in the country. In the state of Maine alone, according to the Department of Homeland Security, there are more than 300 illegal marijuana growth operations being carried out by Chinese nationals involving Chinese organized crime. When you look at some of the social disruptions we've had in the country, you had a unit of Chinese military officers in the summer of 2020 that came working out of the consulate, the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, that were trying to fan the flames of social protests. So, yeah, some of them may be coming here seeking a better life. The problem is you can't distinguish them from those that are here to engage in illegal activities that are designed to do damage to America.
And so with, government knowledge, as you're citing Department of Homeland Security as the source for a lot of this information, with federal government knowledge about what is going on, why does President Xi get treated with kid gloves when he comes to San Francisco? Why is this not, why are we not hearing this from elected officials, starting with the President of the United States instead of Peter Schweizer?
Good question. So a lot of people in Washington don't want to talk about it because they just go along to get along. If you accept the reality of what's going on. You cannot have a normal relationship with China. You can't talk about a trade agreement. You have to confront these realities. And there's just a lot of people in Washington that don't want to do that. Then you have a smaller, more narrow group of people that have massive conflicts because there are financial connections. Consider the Bidens. The Sinaloa cartel, they are the kings of fentanyl in Mexico. They were set up by a Chinese criminal gang called UBG. This is well established, well documented in Mexico and elsewhere. One of the leaders of that gang is a guy named Zhang Anlo, who goes by the name White Wolf. One of White Wolf's business partners gave $5 million to the Biden family. Does Joe Biden really want to have a conversation about fentanyl and about China's role? No, he doesn't. So when he meets with Xi, he goes out of his way to say, we want your help, but we're not pointing fingers. And he certainly does not call them out publicly. If you look at Governor Gavin Newsom of California, he has a long association with members of Chinese organized crime syndicates going back to when he was mayor of San Francisco. He appointed the head of Chinatown's redevelopment in San Francisco. A guy that he appointed was a dragonhead in Chinese organized crime. He became friends with another leader of Chinese organized crime who went by the name Shrimp Boy. He actually donated city taxpayer money to his nonprofit. He had a guy on his transition team that was later charged with a murder-for-hire plot for Chinese organized crime. When Gavin Newsom, as mayor, set up China SF, which is a designed to bring Chinese investment dollars into the United States, he could have pretty much picked anybody in China. He picked a man named Vincent Lo, a Chinese businessman in mainland China, who was already known to have ties with Chinese organized crime. And as a result of that China SF program brought into the United States Chinese companies with links to Chinese organized crime who were involved massively in the drug trade. So, again, does Gavin Newsom really want to confront China and have a conversation about this? No, because it's deeply embarrassing and damaging to some of the choices that he's made in the past.
Well, I've been to 2 fentanyl funerals, sadly, young kids that died way too early. And one question that was asked is, why do they want to kill our children? Why do the Chinese and people in Mexico want to bring harm to our kids?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So China, really since 2010, has carried out a policy called disintegration warfare. That's not me saying this. There's actually a Chinese publication. And disintegration warfare says, kind of in the traditions of Sun Tzu, the famous strategist, the best way to defeat your enemy is by not actually fighting him. It's by undermining him. And fentanyl is part of that. The Mexican cartels themselves, I don't think, particularly want to kill their customers as they view it, but the Chinese certainly do. And from the standpoint of the cartels, the profit margins for fentanyl compared to cocaine or heroin or any of these other drugs, the profit margins with fentanyl are 10 or 20 times greater than they are if you're selling cocaine. So for them, it's just a loss that they're prepared to accept because they're driven by money. But as far as China is concerned, this is absolutely part of their strategy. I have another section in the book that looks at COVID. We know the people that died in COVID, but China actually carried out policies that exacerbated and magnified America's body count during COVID. So this is very, very much intentional in what their approach is, which is to defeat us without actually fighting a war.
So what are some of the other prongs of their disintegration strategy? Because, we talk about Confucius Institutes at colleges. We talk about TikTok. I mean, how integrated is it, and in which of the things that we have discussed previously or we discuss openly are also part of that same strategy that you're describing?
Well, let's talk about violent crimes in the streets. In fact, in the book, I quote the sheriff of Cook County there in your area, describing these small devices called Glock switches that China began smuggling into the United States in 2018. And again, I've got Homeland Security, FBI, Department of Justice documents on this. Thousands of them. These are small devices, highly illegal in the United States, certainly highly illegal in China, where you can't even own a firearm. These switches take a normal Glock handgun and turn it into a fully automatic machine gun. And I have a quote from the sheriff of Cook County and from law enforcement around saying these are flooding into our cities from China, and we can't do anything to stop them. And the Department of Homeland Security says that these devices are particularly being marketed and given to criminal gangs in the United States. So we've reached the point where from 2018 to now, the rate of machine gun fire on America's city streets has risen by more than 1,000%. It's like, Al Capone in the 1930s. And again, this is part of the disruptive practice. It sows chaos on the streets. And of course, China state media has run several stories talking about, look at all the chaos in America. They never mention, of course, the fact that they are the ones that have been smuggling these into the United States and distributing them to criminal gangs over the last 5 years.
And on the use of technology and social media, is that part of it as well?
It is. It is. We obviously have divisions in our country. We all know that, but they are fanning the flames. One of the things they do is they have these large operations that involve thousands of Chinese military technical experts, and they set up hundreds or thousands each individually social media accounts in the United States, and they're posing as Americans. And what they do is very simple. Half of those social media accounts say America is a hopelessly racist society, nothing can be done. The other half of these accounts posing as Americans say, I only like white people. So why are they doing this? They're doing this because they want to magnify social conflict in the United States. It's an intentional strategy. I quote from them. Don't take my word for it. I name the unit that's doing this. And again, if there's something that hopeful, honestly, that comes out of this book, it's that I don't believe we're actually as divided as we think we are. I think there's a lot of the fanning of the flames that is taking place that is trying to magnify it and encourage us to be at each other's throats. And I think this is part of the Chinese strategy.
What's your assessment of the job that House Republicans are doing as they're, pursuing their impeachment inquiries, plural, with respect to these relationships, specifically, of course, the Biden family and the Chinese Communist Party and all of their organs, in addition to others. But specifically on that, Jim Comer keeps saying, got documented $30 million in money that's flowed from the Chinese communists to the Biden family. We don't know what they got for it. Well, you're sort of answering your own question, aren't you? So what's your assessment of the progress being made there, or the direction that has taken?
It's a good question. I think they've done a good job of letting the evidence speak for itself. They're not just going on TV and popping off and giving theories. So I think they handled that in a very good way. Disappointed, obviously, with Democrats. I mean, what Democrats are basically defending, let's just be clear here where this is headed. If what the Bidens did is okay, we're saying in the future that a president, a vice president, a secretary of defense can have their adult children collect tens of millions of dollars from our foreign adversaries for no discernible business purposes whatsoever, and we're okay with that, because that's basically what the Bidens did. And I think the American people, in a way, are ahead of Washington, D.C. in this regard. I mean, I've looked at the polls over the last couple of months, the New York Times, the Harvard-Harris poll, ABC News, the Wall Street Journal. They have all asked the question, do you believe that Joe Biden engaged in highly unethical behavior or illegal behavior in order to help his family's business dealings? And in every single one of those polls, at least 65% of the American people say yes. So the American people see what's going on. I think the American people are ahead of it. I think that we've reached this binary point in American politics where you have elected Democrats. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden does, because of their dislike for Donald Trump. They are not going to criticize him for it. And that's a sad case because, again, one thing I've learned about studying corruption in Washington, if you allow something to happen to become normal, they're all going to do it. And they're all going to start taking large payments from foreign entities because of the Biden rule. The Bidens did it. They got away with it. So why can't I do it too?
How much of a governor on saying anything more pointed about the Chinese communists, the sort of things you're documenting, How much of a governor on that among Republicans has Mitch McConnell been? I mean, you documented in your book Secret Empires the his wife's relationship to his wife's family, and thus his relationship to this Chinese shipping empire and the Chinese Communist Party. So, are people even, sort of China hawks, anti-communist hawks, your Mike Lees of the world, your Rand Pauls of the world, are they afraid to be as specific and as pointed as what you're describing? Because they feel like, well, I don't want to create internal fights within the party, then that's distracting, or for some other reason?
Yeah, no, I think Mitch McConnell is part of that. I think the other part of it is, look, you have very powerful, rich people who are major donors to the Republican Party who have deep pockets and have deep investments in TikTok. One of the biggest donors on the Republican side is a gentleman named Jeff Yass, lives in Pennsylvania. He's the biggest single donor to the Club for Growth, which is a sort of free market libertarian investment firm. He owns 17% of ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok. And some people think this is a $1 trillion company, meaning that his stake is $170 billion. And so because of that, frankly, the Club for Growth has taken a position that they don't think anything should be done to TikTok. So it is a business decision, as it is, unfortunately, financial donor pressure. I think Mitch McConnell certainly has laid out pressure. And look, the fact of the matter is, I quote extensively from Chinese military journals describing how they view TikTok as a Trojan horse and the specific ways in which they are trying to manipulate our young people. And so the notion that, well, we should have a discussion about TikTok, are they good or are they bad? They're not debating that in China. They've already decided this is a great, potent tool to use against us, and they are using it. And in my view, the only solution, Trump proposed it in 2020. It was reversed by Joe Biden. The only solution that works is to force the sale of that entity to an American company. You cannot have the CCP controlling the company that is literally piping all of these images and all of these ideas to our young people.
What about our national security agencies? Are they compromised in a material way? I mean, what we've seen their performance over the last 8 years, we've got a lot of the receipts, as they say, from Taibbi and Schellenberger and others. But I mean, if they're focused on fifth column actions against Trump and Catholics who attend the Latin Mass in Virginia, in the case of the FBI, then they can't be focused on these threats or as focused on these threats that you're describing. So I just wonder, how you would describe the performance of national law enforcement and intel agencies in reaction to the threats that you document.
Well, I've received a lot of feedback from people that have worked or are working at FBI, ATF, Homeland Security, who see this every day. The problem is the political leadership that are running these institutions are ultimately political actors. I mean, we want to think that the director of the FBI is just a great Joe Friday kind of guy, but the fact of the matter is that he's appointed by a president and he's making political calculations. And Joe Biden and his administration have made it clear they do not want to single out China. They do not want to challenge them on any of these issues. So it's an enormous problem. You talk to those in the field that are seeing this, that are living it, that are experiencing it, the guys at DEA that tell me, we know this is a Chinese operation, but the guys upstairs don't want to say it for political reasons, is really the crux of the problem. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote this book, because you have to have this conversation and we need to speak earnestly about what's going on, because it is literally killing people. And all the corruption I've written about before, it was about, political actors getting rich and taking actions. This is really a life and death issue, and it's costing us our best and brightest.
Peter Schweizer, president of the Government Accountability Institute. He's the New York Times bestselling author of a number of books, the most recent, as we've been discussing, Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. The book, Blood Money, available now. Pick it up. Peter Schweizer, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.